This is Kent Molgat with KelownaNow, joined by Ryan Donn, City Councillor Ryan Donn. Thanks for joining us.
Kent, thanks for the invite.
So I like with these interviews for people to get to know you a little better first.
Okay.
So you've got a lot of interesting sort of aspects to your life. You're a musician, right?
Yeah, I haven't had time for it recently, but I have played some songs.
And you work out at the Creekside Theatre?
Yeah, run a theatre for my day job, yeah.
And you have a person with, what's the term?
We say a person with disabilities. So.
With disabilities that lives in your house? You've taken that on as a family?
Yeah, he's lived with us for 12 years, actually. Longer than we've been married, is the truth.
Right?
So he moved in about 6 months before we got married. So, yeah, Tom's essentially a part of our world and has lived with us for 13 years coming up, actually.
Yeah. And that works well for your family?
But it's actually made my life in Kelowna possible, to be honest with you. Because Tom also has helped us be able to live a life where I didn't have, he pays rent. So it's like, as most people in Kelowna have had different sources of income, Tom's also helped us be able to work as a CEA or be a musician or be a politician, or do some things that maybe aren't economically as viable. It's because we've been able to share a home with an adult with disabilities. Right.
So for me, you kind of came out of nowhere and popped up, elected onto council. So I think you might be a unique person to ask. What was it like, going from the outside, coming in, and then just sort of getting to know that whole world, what happens on city council, what happens with staff. Yeah. What have been your observations as to how the whole thing works after a few years there?
Well, it was crazy. I think for the first few months, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. As you said, kind of a bit of a surprise to get in, but over the moon to get in. And then you get in, you're like, okay, read the reports, and you do that, and okay, check. I've read the reports. That's what everybody talks about. Are people going to run and actually read the reports? And then you listen to staff presentations. You're like, hey, perfect. And then you hear from the development community who are building most of the stuff in town. And then you hear from the nonprofit groups. And about 6 months in, I'm like, you know what? I think I've got this. And I was like, oh, man, I forgot the public.
Right.
You get so involved in the world. It's such a complicated machine and all these different moving parts. You're like, no, I'm elected to represent the people. And so then I think that's why I focus on that whole social media aspect to go, no, keep me informed, people. What is your opinion on this? Here's what I'm doing. Because I'm realizing that what I'm doing, people mostly have no idea what politicians do and don't do. So I think for me, I've kind of used this social media thing to be, let's let people know what we're doing and then bring them into the discussion.
I went on your Facebook and I saw you, I guess you had a selfie stick and you were just running through a pretty active agenda for the cities. Is that working for you to sort of stay connected with people?
Well, I think that's what people mostly say thank you for. They say they're thankful for me presenting what's going on in the city in my own way. It's not officially a news release. It's not officially what the city staff are saying or the communications department. It's from my perspective. I was like, hey, this is the biggest agenda we've ever seen. It's going to talk about the OCP, the transportation update. There was 10 things, and I'd say each different one would be something that will affect us in the next 5 years.
Right.
So I think I was pretty blown away by just the epicness of the. Plus, we came from a 22-minute meeting the week before, so I was like, couldn't you balance that out, right? Because the front page news the week before was, council's out in 22 minutes, and then this other one is like, okay, well, 6 hours later in the afternoon session, we've got a massive agenda. So I just think, again, distilling what we're doing on council in a way, or in the city, to the public, I think is part of the role that I love the most.
Right. I think that the public attention tends to get focused on these flashpoint issues, individual developments that have pros and cons to them, and that's where everybody looks. But I think that probably the most important thing that council has, and you I think would agree, is where we're going. The official community plan, which can be a snooze fest for some. But these are important issues. There's a lot of growth on the way.
So I think if you translate it right, it's not a snooze fest for anybody. People have bought houses, and they expect the house next to them never to be knocked down and built into a sixplex or 6 townhouses in a row. That's pretty epic for them. So it's a snooze fest from a policy perspective, but when it actually hits the ground and it translates to how it's going to affect people, it's probably the most important thing there is there. Because if you understand what an OCP is, essentially the foundational idea of where we're going, you're understanding what could be built next to you or what could be built on your land. And when you talk to people, that's one of the most important things for them to understand. And a lot of us don't understand. I think only now am I starting to grasp that after 3 years of meetings, all day on a Monday, every other Tuesday night. I mean, that's what now we live, is those decisions. Every week public hearings are about, this is too much for my neighborhood. This is not enough. This is not good enough. There's too much transportation issues, and that's where almost every public hearing is about that. So the OCP, I would say, it might sound like a boring 3 letters together. That's essentially what drives most decisions, because we'll often refer back to, well, hey, I understand that you think that going from one house to 3 stories next to you is a problem, but we've all said in the official community plan that we're going to allow room for, and the next one's going to be allow room for 50,000 people by 2040 to move to Kelowna. And that's what Stats Canada said. That's not even from staff.
It's amazing. It's amazing how, and I was looking at that, and we get to that with what sounds like a modest growth, like 1.5% growth. But it just you put that forward 20 years. That's 45 or 50,000 people.
So between, I think it was 2011 and 2016, we had 8.5% growth. So now we're at 129, almost about to hit 130,000 people in Kelowna.
So this is the equivalent of taking everyone who currently lives in West Kelowna and having them abandon their homes and drive across a bridge. Where are we going to put them all?
Right.
So
I don't think they want to do that all the time, but sometimes they want to do that.
Just trying to get a sense of the numbers here. So where do we put that many people?
And I think that's where, so imagine, that's the question we're going to ask the public, right? So you ask me and I go, okay, I would love to say here, like more in the urban centers is what I would say. We hopefully consistently, everybody in council would say, and I think the public would say, we need to build up, not out. I think I've heard many people answer that in your last video around the town. So it's like, we need to build more concentrated where we have all the amenities.
I like tall, not sprawl.
There we go. Okay, but do we actually? So that sounds great, but do we vote that way? Is that what we want in a community? Or do we want to have the nice house looking out over the lake without not much houses around us kind of thing, and that be up in the Mission?
Right.
That's where most people that come here from, let's say, Alberta, they've got their nest egg and they buy, well, they were more attracted to the area. And I think now we're starting to say, okay, maybe they want a condo downtown.
Right. We already see the Mission, or I do at least, as being a transportation sort of bottleneck even now, and there's so much more coming on there. I don't know if that's solvable, but what do you see in terms of the development in that direction?
So I think it's the main area we get complaints from. So I think, and it's often to do with if school's in and people are going to work, it's busy. So the two things are, at that peak window from that 8 to 9 a.m., it does take what can take 50 minutes, and we got a study about this, it takes 40. And we live in this impulse-based world where you can buy a song that you used to have to wait to listen to on the radio and press record to get. And so we're not used to waiting. And so there is a consistent growth in, one, our expectation of how quick we can get things, and also waiting for others is less and less in our cultural psyche, I think. Right. So I think that we have some conversations to have in the community, and I think the OCP actually is exactly what that conversation is. How much growth? I mean, there's a new plan. Thompson Flats will be coming to council in the next 6 months, I think. They've had a public open house. It's the area next to Kettle Valley. It's the last flat piece of ground in the Mission. 1,200 homes are proposed. No commercial, or essentially no commercial, not much amenities. Subsidized by, roadways that essentially are paid for partly by the taxpayer, because we have a 15% assist on roads. Snow clearing is going to cost us a fortune down the road. So is that appropriate?
Yeah, and
and I think that's the question. So that's what's going to come to council to be asked. And in that moment, if somebody says no, for example, then there'll be a large population say, well, you're not business friendly. Or are we more business friendly to force and essentially ensure that the growth happens within our inner cities, within our inner 5 different pockets we've said we're going to have growth in, like the Landmark area that has virtually almost no residential right now. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about adding a lot of people there.
Yeah. So in terms of alleviating transportation pressures, there's this South Perimeter Road that...
Yeah, I think, South Perimeter is not going to relieve that much pressure.
I was looking at the map of that, and it's an alternate route, but you don't even get to it since you're already through the worst bottleneck. No,
it essentially just is a road that is going to help the pond's development get out of the area
It's going to help me get to my kids' soccer practice faster from East Kelowna over.
Right, it will help some, but it's not a magic bullet solution. Like, it might sound big, like it's $10 million, and I would be lying if I said that's going to help solve the issues that people feel transportation getting out of the area. I would love, for example, to move the school times back half an hour, forward half an hour. I mean, I would love to have workers talk about going into work by 10 a.m. or 7 a.m. So I think that's the conversation that are more likely to leave transportation versus build or working mobile in their houses. But we have to get our kids to school. So really getting kids to school is a main point with the transportation is an issue.
Also, every time you need to do a bit of shopping, like Kettle Valley had a convenience store. Last I heard, I don't think it's...
I don't know where it's at right now, but I know it struggled. I know that commercial in these outer areas have always struggled. And so the ponds also has a potential commercial thing that's been talked about for a while. But then do people actually go to it? Or do they prefer to go to Costco and load up for the month? Or do they prefer to go every week? Or do they prefer to go every day? And then do we have the time to go every day within our lives that are busy? Do you go pick up milk every day? Right. Or is it last minute, oh, hey, we need to get the milk? Like, think about that conversation in your own household. How often do you buy milk?
So this official community plan process does its best to reach out to get public involvement. And
absolutely.
So if someone's watching this,
it's a community plan. It's not a staff plan, right?
So how do people get their input?
Yeah. So this summer they'll start seeing stuff. So there'll be a public engagement throughout the summer to talk about how and where, like what we're talking about, and even as we're debating this, so there'll be a number of events that people start publicly seeing through the city communications channel. KelownaNow that runs some stories on them, and I'll post it on social media, and hopefully in one of those things they actually get the update as to here's your chance to talk about your concerns or your hopes for Kelowna.
Right. And all of this engagement will be going on while you're ramping up your campaign for re-election, I guess.
Well, I have clearly said to anybody that asks, I've been saying I will be running again. I love, as I said, I got in there, kind of let my fluke to get in there, but I love providing the voice I do around council, so I've already said I'll be running again, and hopefully that all those people announcing and or not announcing won't really affect the decisions, and hopefully my hope is that we still make all the best decisions leading up to that election, and then, but I love the job. Like, honestly, I actually love it, and communicating with people and trying to balance everything we've talked about today or whatever, it's just... Yeah. It's enjoyable, and honestly, we get more thank yous than we get negatives on council. Right. So people might say, hey, I'm concerned about crime or homelessness. And most times we have, okay, well, here's what we're looking at for this. Here's what we're about to do. Give us 6 more months and we'll have this thing started. You had an interview with Journey Home. So I feel like we're mostly on the right track, but an election is a good point for people to go, actually, yes or no, you weren't, right? And that's what elections are.
Well, you seem enthusiastic, right? And
well, I love the job.
And you seem to be throwing yourself into it. So
yeah. So I work hard. So I need to. But it's grappling the balance. Council's a role of balance. It's never about all this or none of this. It's about how do you balance all those needs together.
All right. Well, Ryan Donn, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Ken.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
It's Ryan Donn, City Councillor. He is running again. This is Kent Molgat for Kelowna Now.